I'm back. I'm here. Welcome to episode 2 of So You Want to Be a Writer. Here. Boop. Let's get rid of that. I don't think I want my audio coming through the other thing. How you doing? Hopefully you had a good week. I think I had a good week. Pretty sure I had a good week. I'm not sure. Yeah, no, I had a good week. It was very I've been very industrious as of late. But that's not about me. Not like that. So, welcome back to another episode of So You Want to Be a Writer. Basically, this is just where we talk about the aspects of writing that a lot of the... how do I put it? It's the aspect of writing that a lot of the self-helps and the YouTube videos don't really go into, but just the actual human aspect of writing. What the hell does that mean, John? Well, it basically means that it's one thing to grab a pen and paper and have a story and write it, go through, do whatever you got to do to publish it, or whether you don't publish it or edit it, whatever you're doing. No one ever really talks about the everything that comes with that. And there's a lot that comes with it. So tonight we're going to talk about inspiration and energy. The most I can do is share with you where my ideas come from, where my energy comes from, what my inspiration is, and it and how it works for me, how I make it fit. My inspiration for a story can come from anywhere. I'm a bizarre individual, so the story I'm working on next, the Fanatic, that novella originally came from the inspiration for that came from a song by The Art of Noise called Promenade 2 or something along those lines. And I remember when I heard the song, and I've got just a hint of synesthesia, and when I heard the song for the first time, boom, I just had this image of this stuff, right? And it was like, oh wow, that's really cool. And from that I basically wrote a story, and the story, the crux of the story in the long run, oddly enough, had nothing to do with the original inspiration, that song, even though that visualization that I had from when I first heard that song, that is in the story, but it's not by any means the crux of the story. So it's funny that the idea for the scene came out of that song, but it completely morphed became something else, and that happens. That can happen a lot of the time. But like I said, there's you never know what's going to inspire you. So before I get on to this next part, which is like about embracing all inspirational aspects that you come across, even if it's only for a moment, oftentimes people, how do I say this? People won't necessarily write something or do something because of they're afraid of what people might think of them, and you got to let that go. It's really, really not a good thing. Just let that go. Just don't worry about what other people think. I think I'm a little hot. I'm going to turn that down just a little bit, audio-wise. I don't think like I'm hot. Like hot. That's not my way. No, but so the inspiration though, you want to. Let that be your own thing. Don't let other people dictate whether something is stupid or not. Now, sometimes you're going to come up with stupid shit, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily bad, nor does it mean that it has to get written. But you have to look at every aspect of this stuff and be your own person when it comes to that stuff. And by that I mean just look at something, right? What a lot of times some of the inspiration will come from things you already know, and what the funny thing is, these are things that we can sometimes take for granted. You know, you've probably heard the adage, write what you know. And I didn't buy into that for the longest time, but then I started doing it. Yeah, I still write about a lot of stuff I don't know about, which requires a lot of Googling, a lot of research, a lot of books and things. But when you write about what you know, once I started doing that, it was kind of fun, because now you can take this thing. Well, I remember this place from when I was a kid, and there was this things that happened there, and I can incorporate that in there into the story, and stuff like that helps to give body to, and not necessarily filler, but just good body. It's good coloring. But like I said, your inspiration can come from music. It could come from something you see. It could come from feelings. You know, it could come from smells. You know, smells are crazy the way when you look at the emotional effect that they can have on a person. Because sometimes you'll smell something that will take you back to a childhood moment that maybe you hadn't thought of in 30, 40, 50 odd years. And then you'll get a whiff of that, and it's just that for that split second of time, you're back there, right? That could be inspirational. You know, another thing is the energy that we we pour into our writing. I could be a little obsessive when it comes to writing, for lack of a more colorful metaphor. And I have a lot of had kind of a fucked up childhood. And that being said, you know, there's a lot of shit that comes out of that as an adult. Once you start dealing with things, you realize that there's certain ghosts in the belfry that are just going to be there. They're not going to go away anytime soon, and you're better off just embracing them. And one of my ghosts happens to be just a little bit of self-loathing, just from some of the fucked up shit that happened as a kid. Now, a lot of people will let that self-loathing define them, or they'll let it take them in different directions in their life. Some not so good. I tend to give that self-loathing kind of I put it in the office of muse. I let it be my muse to a degree, and it and you'd be amazed at the things that can come out of that, the energies, the drive. The drive is pretty crazy. But you never know where that energy is, and you know, the place you draw your energy from, it might not be an emotional zone. It could be, you know, I mean, there's whether you believe in these or whether you don't, you know, there's chakras, you know, and a lot of people, you know, we devise a lot of our energies from, if you follow that aspect of theology, you know, you got your yes, I'm reading this, by the way. Just because I only know of the one chakra that I really focus on as far as where my energy comes from. But, you know, you got your crown, you know, which is your spirituality. You got your third eye, which is awareness. Your throat is communication. Heart is love. Solar plexus, wisdom. This sounds made up, but there is something to it. That's just me. You got your sacral, which is sexuality, and then you get your root chakra, which is your basic, you know, trust. Your sacral, I'm sorry, also has your sexuality and creativity. It could be that could be your thing, you know, and maybe it's a combination. I was reading, I think it was Scott Adams had a quote. I could be misquoting, sorry if I am, but either way, it's the quote that matters, not the person who said it. That everybody tries to find a talent. They try to find what they're good at, and then they try to get out there and take what they're good at out there and say, hey, look at me, I'm good at this, and it's a thing that you should have me do for you, and you'll give me money. But he says to basically, that's all fine and well, and for some people that works out just fine, but for others who are a little more all over the place, it might be, their talent might be, well, it's a little bit of this, 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 and then that, all those little bits form like what's you could call an amalgam of talent. you know, that is almost unique in its own right, and you put that to work, you put that to use, and now you're bringing a very unique thing. And if you know Scott Adams is, he did Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is a phenomenally crazy story. One of my favorites. It was quirky and wacky, and the way he did it, it's pretty cool that how many people, because it's like that's got a cult following. And I'm not saying that everything that is unique per se, because unique isn't always necessarily good. But sometimes unique is better than the usual, if that makes any sense. But getting back to inspiration, inspiration's all around you. You never know. A lot of times it's going to be, it could be just a thought. You know, you might be reading a book and you might see a passage and or a sentence or a word, and you might look at that word and go, wow. And you'll get this crazy ass idea. And the trick is with a lot of the ideas that'll come across your head is to don't judge them, you know. Or as I heard a term last night, well, not really a term, but just kind of a concept, to where you look at everything from a very judgmental standpoint, as far as okay, the person who wrote this is trying to convey this message, or they're trying to do this. And I'm sure there are some people or writers who do that, but when you're thinking through concepts and ideas in your own right, you got to bring them all in. You got to let them all in. Bring them in for a beer, you know, and you look at them, and some of the ideas are like, you know, hey, you go back outside, work out a little bit, hit that obstacle course, come back, and you'll do other ideas, or hopefully. But God, I am pretty today, aren't I? I need to shave. But be true to those ideas, because just because an idea wouldn't make a good story necessarily doesn't mean it wouldn't be a good scene in a story, or a good little digression, or some form of exposition. It'd be crazy. I mean, if you look at my notes, I've got some have single word, multi-line entries that are just I'll look at it and I'll like, okay, what the hell were you thinking? But then as I look at it and I'll read it, and it's like, maybe I'll get back to what I was originally thinking, right? But if I don't, that could be inspiration for something different. So that one thing I was thinking is now evolved into this other thing. And the thing is, you have to, you got to embrace that. You got to accept those ideas, because they're all, every creative idea that you get could turn into something. You just have to give it the chance to do that, if that makes any sense. You know, and sometimes your inspiration might be a character, you know. Like I envision, or like a lot of times when I'm just churning away at the ideas, a lot of times it might be a conversation, you know. And you know how it is when you're maybe you had a bad day, maybe you had a bad interaction with someone, and then you play that interaction back in your head, and you say, boy, I should have said da 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 da. And granted, pardon me, most times you probably good you didn't say da 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 da. But that being said, sometimes you let those conversations play out in your head, and you'd be surprised at some of the stuff that can come out of them. Sometimes you might just get a sentence or a comment or a line, or maybe a description of something or a feeling. But you write that shit down, because that's it. Like I said, your inspiration can come from anywhere. You never really know when it's going to hit, what it's going to be, let alone what form it's going to take, you know. Inspiration is a tricky thing, because it's not even fair to call it inspiration, because yeah, there are things that can inspire you, but at the same time there's going to be things that just blossom. It's like you'll see something and it's like it's a spore or a seed. Next thing you know, it's thriving, and you're like, oh fuck, I gotta write this. Because there's times I've come up with entire concepts of a story, you know, beginning, middle, end, and it'll be all I can do to get that down before it leaks out. 'Cause it can leak out depending on the state of mind when you come up with some of the stuff. But you'll find that the more you do that, the more inspiration you might experience. Is that work? I think that works. We'll go with that. But like I said, it can come from feelings, sights. So if you want to write, if you want to be a writer, you really have to let that imagination of yours flourish, and you almost got to open the gates, take it off the leash, and just let that imagination go. Don't let it ride herd on you, but you could ride herd on that imagination and just run with it. Because sometimes, I don't know, sometimes it'll just, some of the ideas will just start coming forth, and it's just like a Pandora's box at times, because you're like, oh man, yeah, that'd be cool. Well, if that's going to happen, da 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 da, and then the intuitive aspect will kick in. It's like, well, if like this is happening and this is happening, then it makes sense that this happens because maybe this character. And the next thing you know, you're in that character format, and you're going down that path, and who knows, like 5-10 minutes later, you might have a character. Now, maybe your inspiration comes from somebody or something you see on the street. That has happened with me. There's been times when I'll see somebody and they'll just have a look. I've always had a thing for faces. I don't know what it is about facial structure, but it's the bone structure and the way everything comes together to form that individual, that unique person. And sometimes I'll see someone and they'll just have a structure to where it literally brings a character upon you almost, to where it's like, oh yeah, especially like when I'm, backburnering a story idea, which right now that's going on. So I got about 6 burners back there just thinking shit up. And it's always spitting stuff out, and every once in a while I'll come up with a line or something. I just got to scribble that down. But there's an old man who was in the Fanatic when I originally wrote the novella, and he was the end result of this cranky old homeless guy who was sometimes he would take your money, and other times he'd take your money and just throw it away. I mean, he was a little left to center, but I just liked the way he would he was almost trolling people. And this was back before trolling was a thing. He was a hipster troller, doing it before it was cool. But, and sometimes the one thing about inspiration is it's got to be organic. It's got to be natural. You can't force it. You're like, I got to go outside and look around and get some inspiration. I'm looking for inspiration, which it's okay to look for inspiration, but you got to approach that kind of thing with 0 to minimal expectation. But you just got to be open to it, though. You just got to be open, because sometimes you'll see something, and you know how it is, man. We get caught up in our fucking days, and it's just like, God damn it, that fucking life sucks. And maybe you got your that third eye of yours is closed for the moment because you're just like, bitter, whatever. And you'll miss stuff from time to time. But then, if you just kind of keep the eye open, just a little half-lidded, sometimes you'll be having one of those days, and it'll be just like, oh, God damn it, Jesus, that's pretty cool. I like that over there. I'm gonna write that down. I'm gonna make a note, and it's crazy. It's crazy. That's the best Christopher Walken you're ever gonna get out of me. It's crazy. There's been times when I've been downtown, like for work, over here in Minneapolis, and lunchtime you go and sit in one of the plazas, and it's just all manner of people coming through there from different lifestyles, different countries, different what have you. And I've always been a people watcher, so I tend to watch a lot of people and judge them accordingly. But sometimes I'll see someone, and you'll be like, their essence will just speak out. And it's where it's like, you'd be a good character, and then you just kind of make a note of of that. And like I said, you know, you never know where that inspiration is going to come from. Sometimes there's been a few screenplays that I've written to where I had an idea of this awesome scene, you know, and like it might be the end of the story. So it's like, yeah, that's a good idea. Now I got to build the rest of the story. But sometimes, you know, when you're always start thinking about it, and it actually, you know, I've got a first, second, and third act. Not that I write a book the way they do screenplays, but I keep that. Well, I'm not a formulaic person or a formatty person. I'll still adhere to a particular format because there's a certain things that the human animal looks at. You know, every story, there's certain aspects that they need for that story to have a fulfilling end for us people, because we're just fucked up. That's who we are. That's why we're here. So, inspiration, it's everywhere. You know, you got to examine and embrace all the inspirational aspects that hit you upside the head, even if it's only for a moment. You know, and it can come from anywhere, man. Music, fucking sights, feelings, smells, a touch. Sometimes you'll touch something and it'll just open up a world of, I don't want to say wonder, but, you know, if you get used to your imagination just kind of running and doing its thing, it is kind of wondrous from time to time. Don't get lost in that, because it can give you some really intense presence issues, and those aren't always fun. Something I think my wife can attempt to this, or she can attest to this. I have presence issues from time to time because I get so caught up in a project or a story that I'm working on that it'll almost like consume me to a degree, and you know, she'll kind of shake me out of it a little bit, but it takes effort to stay out of that rabbit hole. But it's still okay to go into your head. You know, just get in there. Just don't let it consume you, or don't consume yourself. If that makes any sense. Yeah. So remember, and also, you know, your energy. It's pretty important to realize where your energy. Well, let me rephrase this. I don't think it's important necessarily to where your energy comes from, but just to approach your projects with the energy required, and not necessarily always the minimum, but just, you know, you should at least have an idea of what the minimum, pardon me, energy is going to require for this project, because there's times you got to push yourself with writing, especially when you'll get towards the tail end of things, and you might burn out. You might hit that burnout stage to where you're like, oh, you know, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And sometimes it might be better just to go and work on aspects of the story writing, or the after, you know, the editing and stuff, or aspects of that aren't so weighty, if that makes any sense. But sorry, just looking at some notes. The energy has got to come from somewhere. That's just, and it can come from, like I said, it can come from an emotional aspect. Maybe you get some inner turmoil, and instead of letting that shit consume you, rowdy that energy up and throw it into your writing. I think you'd be surprised at some of the stuff you can come up with. Chakras, if it's coming from your chakras, you know, just use that. Especially if you believe in that. I kind of lean towards chakras just simply because of some experiences that I've had, and some, including the physiological experiences. So it comes from somewhere, and as long as you can remind, what's the word I'm looking for? As long as you can recognize where it's coming from, then you can go back to that energy source time and time again. Like I said, I got that self-loathing, which is more of a muse, but at the same time, it's an energy. so that way it doesn't even remotely consume me, you know. And then the chakras, blah blah blah. Like my a lot of my energy I would dare say, if I had a gun to my head, would come from my sacral chakra, which is the sexuality, creativity. That's where a lot of that comes from. Oddly enough, I don't have a lot of sex in my books. Who knew, right? I'm not a big fan of sex scenes unless they actually further the story along. There was a book I was reading a while back about this this guy who dies. He freezes his brain. He goes to one of the places where you can freeze your brain once you die. And so years later, he wakes up in this little white room, and well, he's died, and the place who owned his brain went bankrupt, and so brains went back to the family members, but the ones they didn't, they sold off to this place, and this place actually takes the brains, and then they put them in this simulation, and then this guy goes and he fights zombies and stuff. And the story was really good. It was a really fun after the world falls kind of apocalyptic tale. But then he had these sex scenes, and they were very graphic sex scenes, and I mean very, very, very graphic sex scenes. And don't get me wrong, nothing wrong with sex, but if it's just there to be there, it's really not. You're not doing your readers any justice. You're not doing yourself any justice, and more importantly, you're not doing your characters, your story, any justice. Like I said, if it belongs there and it has something that moves the story along and it's there for a purpose, that's one thing. You know, it's like Richard Morgan, who wrote Altered Carbon, fantastic trilogy, the Altered Carbon series. If you saw it on Netflix, that was good. It was okay. The trilogy is so much better. But Morgan has, in his books, he's got some very graphic sex scenes, but they're where they belong, and you understand why they're there and the mechanics that are being used to further the story along within that aspect of writing. So I know I'm digressing here, sorry. Again, that might be a write what you know kind of deal. But keep the stuff that belongs in the story. Does that make sense? Sorry, I didn't mean to digress so much. As long as it forwards the story along, not that it feels good to write it. Because there's a lot of stuff that I'd like to do that feels good to write, but it doesn't necessarily further a story along. And sometimes I'll write just... sometimes I'll even try to write a little 280 character story on Twitter. Just, or not even a story, but maybe a glimpse, you know. In fact, I think that's what I was calling a little series I was doing there for a while. It was called A Glimpse, or The Glimpse, something like that, or just Glimpse. I don't remember. But you just got little moments like that can hit you. And again, this comes all the way back to the inspiration and the energy that, you know, we're talking about. It's important to understand where your energy comes from, and it's very important to embrace the things that come along that inspirational path through your brain. Don't discount them. Don't worry about what people think. And if you got somebody who you're concerned about what they might think before, if you were to write a particular thing, talk to that person. If you really feel that strongly, I have, and that's I recommend doing that. But when it comes to inspiration and the energy that it takes to be a writer, you got to embrace it. You gotta just accept whatever comes your way, because it's pretty cool stuff. We were watching a thing. I'm not a Kanye music fan, but Kanye the individual, I really get some pretty interesting stuff out of him every once in a while. And you know, his thing was like, you know, he felt a certain way about certain things, and everyone was saying, "Oh man, you're an idiot for feeling that way." And then he talks about when he went into the hospital, and when he came out, he had lost some of that confidence about standing up for what he believed in, but then he kind of found that strength and energy again, and now he just stands up for exactly what, you know, it's like everybody wants. he was talking about how everybody might want you to think a certain way or do a certain thing, and if you do something that goes against that crowd of the social justice warriors or whoever they are out there, then you could be a pariah, labeled a pariah, or a dick, or a traitor, or a Democrat, or a Republican, or a whatever. Be true to yourself. Don't worry about what other people are going to think you're writing, because if you're worried about that, the next thing you know, you're writing for what you think people want to see, and 9 times out of 10, when you write that way, you're going to miss the mark every time. Everything's going to be just a little left of center, and I don't think you want that. Other than that, I don't know much else. Just want to have a little thing, like I said, on inspiration and energy. Remember, it's everywhere. Write what you know. Examine and embrace all inspirational aspects, even if it's just for a moment. It come in the form of music, sights, feelings, smells. I remember I found this little metal rusted sprocket about 35 years ago, just lying on the side of the road. A little tiny thing. Flywheel, not sprocket. And I still have it to this day. And little things like that still inspire me once in a while to do things. So, write. That's what I mean. To keep it clean. So yeah, energy. Where do you draw your energy from? Find out. Chakras, inner turmoil, emotional, blah, blah, blah. It's got to come from somewhere. Recognize it so you can tap into it whenever you need. I am JP, and this is episode 2 of So You Want to Be a Writer. So you got any questions? You got any thoughts, ruminations, attitudes? Put something in the comments below. I think they're down there. Somewhere. Yeah, I'll be back next week, and I think next week we might talk characters a little more. Maybe storyline. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. It's Sunday night. A lot can happen between now and then. So yeah, and if you're curious about who the heck this weirdo is, you can head on over to my site, www.concretesalad, salad as in leafy greens.com. It's also down in the description. And you can, just in case you're curious, get some information on my books. My latest one, Blood and Moonlight, just released about a couple weeks ago. It's a reimagining of Frankenstein with a lot of history in there, but that's for another day. I think I'm out of here, man. So, c'est la vie.